So joining us now is Elise Labott, author of the Cosmopolitics newsletter on Substack. Timing-wise, as I welcome you, what do you take for this being, 33 minutes late right now?
Well, I mean, Alex, obviously they had a lot to talk about, and the White House actually just released a very interesting statement about a trilateral call that President Trump had with the Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Prime Minister of Qatar, talking about trying to get them back, to a better working relationship. Apparently, Prime Minister Netanyahu apologized for while they took that strike on Qatar to go after Hamas leadership, that a Qatari serviceman was killed. According to the White House, Israel promised never to do that again and apologized for violating Qatari sovereignty. We'll see what the readout from Israel looks like. But clearly, President Trump is trying right now to get Netanyahu, the Qataris, back together to finish up the negotiating on a ceasefire deal. And that's what they're talking about right now. And as you know, as they're meeting at the White House, the Israelis are continuing this offensive on Gaza City, which is continuing to go after Hamas, but also inflicting a lot of damage on the ground to civilians.
So given this extensive discussion they're having, this call that you say with Qatar as well, this three-way call, what are you going to watch for when the two of them take to the podium and talk about their meeting?
I'm really going to look for any hint that Prime Minister Netanyahu is ready to sign on to President Trump's plan for an end to the war, a ceasefire, the release of the hostages, and really thinking about the day after. Prime Minister Netanyahu has talked about defeating Hamas. His military generals have said defeating the entire group isn't going to really be possible. You really need to find this day after in Gaza, an end to the war, find some governance in Gaza, rebuild all the things that are not only in President Trump's plan, but also in the plan that the French and the Saudis laid out at the United Nations next week, some other plans that are floating around there. It's all about the day after. Prime Minister Netanyahu is continuing this assault with really no end game in sight. So I want to look to see if Prime Minister Netanyahu is willing to sign on to an end to the war, which he hasn't really been willing to do so far. And I'm going to be looking for any tension between what President Trump is saying about no annexation of the West Bank and what Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying.
Is there anything that President Trump can do today if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu signs on and says we're going to try to pursue peace, maybe at least a ceasefire, that can guarantee he has to follow through and not renege on his words when he gets back to Israel?
Well, I think that President Trump has been very clear in private, at least, but lately in public with Prime Minister Netanyahu that he said enough is already. This war has to end. He's going to give him some, pretty tough warnings. The question is President Trump willing to follow through with his threats, not just on rhetoric, but diplomatic measures that he can take? I don't think the U.S. is really going to get into the idea of suspending any weapons shipments, but President Trump has really given Prime Minister Netanyahu a lot of political cover, not only in the first term, but in this next term. And he could say, look, I could make things very difficult for you. Prime Minister Netanyahu is having a very precarious situation domestically. He really doesn't want to take on President Trump right now. So I think if President Trump is willing to not only talk tough, but put his money where his mouth is, in terms of, that political support that he can yank at any time, Prime Minister Netanyahu knows that he really can't go too far with Trump, especially on that annexation, Alex, of the West Bank. The Arab states have made clear that's a red line. President Trump, he said he's not going to allow that to happen. But if you look at the United Nations today, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, said very clearly that Hamas is in the West Bank. There are weapons that they need to go after. So I'm very concerned about whether the West Bank is the next military offensive. And that will just, not only further inflame the situation on the ground, but only deepen Israel's isolation. And the Abraham Accords that President Trump negotiated will really be a distant memory.
I was going to say, be incredibly weakened. Okay. Elise Labott, thank you very much, Elise, for that.